Alright, Debate Kansas City students, here we are, finally, the last speech of a debate round. I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted just from making these videos. I can only imagine what it's been like to watch all of these videos. That is, if anyone actually watches all of them. We conclude with the second affirmative rebuttal. For a lot of people, this is one of their favorite speeches in a debate round to give. And the reason why is the affirmative gets to start out the debate on their turf. Then after we've had about an hour of arguments, they get to finish the debate on their turf. And if you can save up some prep time and you have 3, 4, 5 minutes to write the 2AR, it's often the time when things become clear, when you see mistakes made by the other side, maybe even a couple of mistakes that your side has made, but no one is speaking after you. So if you have the ability to crystallize, if you have the ability to wiggle your way out of some arguments that maybe you're behind on, and then with passion tell the judge why they just have to support your case, then you can win a lot of debate rounds in the second affirmative rebuttal. I have seen countless debate rounds where I thought the negative was surely going to win. But the second affirmative pulled out some tricks, pulled out all the stops, and convinced everybody that you absolutely had to vote affirmative. With that being said, let's go ahead and check out 5 tips for how to give an effective second affirmative rebuttal, or the 2AR. Step 1, look for 2NR mistakes. Look, the 2NR is a very difficult speech because they had all these arguments in the negative block, and then the affirmative, the 1AR, your partner, responded to them in 3 or 5 minutes. So sometimes the second negative doesn't know exactly what to do. It's like they have too many options, and so they go for too many arguments, or they hone in on the wrong argument. And so what you need to do is take back and look at it and say, what did the negative do wrong? They went for this argument, but what holes did they leave? What did they not cover? Or maybe they went for so many arguments that they never quite won any of them. Either way, listen to the 2NR, flow every single word of it, and see what mistakes they made. Who knows, maybe there's some add-on advantage you ran that they dropped, or maybe you had an argument on the disadvantage called a link turn that flips the disadvantage back on the negative team, and they didn't get to it, or they forgot about it. And so you could go to their disadvantage and you could say, you know what? 2NR made a mistake here. They didn't talk about our link turn. That means this disadvantage now becomes an advantage for the affirmative. Either way, look for those mistakes. The more you do debate, the more obvious those mistakes are going to become. Let's check out step number 2. Just like the 2NR, the 2AR has to be focused on the reasons you win the debate. Now here's the interesting thing. I told you that the 2NR should step up and say, we win for these reasons. Well, the affirmative needs to do the same thing. Only you have the opportunity to take into account the negative reasons. So you may flow what the 2NR said and the reasons that the negative should win the debate. And then when you write your reasons that the affirmative wins the debate, you can sort of take those into account. And you might include at the beginning of your speech why some argument you're winning is far more important than an argument that the negative believes they're ahead on. In my example before, I said the 2NR might talk about an economy disadvantage. Well, let's say if I'm running a case that solves for environmental problems like global warming, I might say the first reason we win is we stop global warming. That's more important than their economy disadvantage, because when global warming happens, it's going to cause oceans to rise. Massive problems are going to happen in terms of houses being destroyed, which will skyrocket insurance rates, which is going to collapse the economy in the future, which means their disadvantage is inevitable, and the only hopes of preventing an economic collapse is by preventing global warming, not to mention all of the terrible environmental consequences that come along with global warming. So global warming is a far more important problem to fix than to worry about an economy that's already in the tank. Example of what it might sound like. Before we thought, man, we've really got to be focused on that economy argument, but when the 2AR gets done, hopefully you're saying, wow, global warming sounds like a very important issue, something that I should be focused on more. So give the reasons you win, and you have the opportunity to take into account negative arguments as you develop those reasons. But that begins and builds the 2AR just like it does the 2NR. Both of these rebuttal speeches, you start with the reasons you win and build from there. Check out step 3. Play your strength, the case. Sometimes affirmatives get so bogged down in all the negative attacks on their case that they forget about the case itself. You know, maybe there's all these disadvantages or all these other issues. What you want to do is frame the debate around how you started the debate, the case. So if you're trying to fix global warming, the example I gave you before was good. You'd want to keep rolling with that. Remind the judge. In our first speech, we told you that global warming within 20 or 30 years is going to cause an increase in disease. It's going to cause insurance companies to collapse. It's going to make resource wars more likely. It's going to kill off vital species. And so you remind us of all these things. And if you've given a number of 2ARs on the same debate case, you'll find that you almost develop a script in your head. It's not written down, but you know how to deliver it. You know how to explain the case perfectly, beautifully in the second affirmative rebuttal. And you kind of have an advantage here that you can get used to that. I actually have seen people write an overview or a script of these arguments to explain their case in really crisp terms. So, play to your strength the case. Don't get totally bogged down in negative arguments. Pull it back on your turf. Remind us all that this case is a great idea. Now, that leads us easily into step 4. Downplay the negative. By the end of the debate round, you want to try and characterize the negative arguments as desperate attempts to stop the change that we need. You know, this economy disadvantage, hey, by the end of the round, it's got uniqueness problems and link problems. It's nowhere near as strong as our case. Our case is clearly the strongest thing in this debate round. Different attacks against your solution or solvency argument. You know, say, look, they've nitpicked a couple issues. Overall, our plan's still a really good idea. Are this evidence or are that evidence explains why. And just like the 2NR, you want to cite evidence by name as you try to both downplay the negative and strengthen the affirmative. But I think I covered that pretty well in the 2NR. Just know that those tips also apply to the 2AR. So, you're making the affirmative case sound incredible. You're making the negative sound like a diversion, something that's taken us off the path. Last tip, and potentially the most important. Use your advantage as the last speaker of the debate round. Very important. Nobody gets to respond to your speech. The negative team is done talking, which means you get the last word. And in a debate round, that can be very, very important. If the negative team has been making a really good argument and you've had a tough time answering it, and then suddenly it comes to you in the 2AR, technically, you're not supposed to make a new answer in rebuttals. But this is the last speech of the debate round. And you want to try and wiggle and craft your way just a little bit so that if you're making a new argument, you try to tie it into old arguments somehow. But it's your last speech. You might be desperate. You might have to make a new argument and try and disguise it. You might have to bring up something that you hadn't thought of until the last speech. And you certainly want to play on the judge's heartstrings any chance you can get. You want to look for any advantage out there. Don't be afraid to wiggle a bit and make kind of new arguments, because even though they're technically not allowed in a debate round, it's up to the judge to figure that out. And 2ARs, ever since the activity of debate has begun, have been using their opportunity as the last speaker to pull debate rounds out of the hat at the last second. So don't be afraid to do it. Use the advantage as the last speaker. The negative, they know it's coming. They know that 2ARs are going to pull out all the stops, so you should do the same thing to give yourself the best chance of winning. So those are the 5 tips. You're looking for 2NR mistakes. You're always giving the reasons that you win, always closing. You're playing to your strengths, the case. You're downplaying the negative arguments as diversions, and use that last speech to your advantage. Really persuade us. And hopefully with all of these tips, in our Speeches of Policy Debate series, you've learned something, you've gotten a better idea of how to debate, and I hope that you all enjoyed it. Take care.